Now, so we mentioned the clitoris. Are there other areas in the vagina or I guess other areas? I don't know. Educate us. Like, how many different ways can we reach an orgasm?
Oh, so there's lots of information out there that says that there are so many different ways to have different orgasms. There are G-spot orgasms, A-spot, P-spots, and all these other spots. So let me tell you something, because it's already for some people, it's already difficult for a lot of people with vulvas to achieve orgasm. And again, that goes back to not being able to value our own pleasure, and not understanding our bodies, and not understanding what sexual freedom looks like for ourselves. But let's go back to orgasm. There are different ways for people to have orgasm. I'm going to say this. A lot of us get our sexual education from listening to other people and, unfortunately, porn. And when I say unfortunately, I am not a person who is against porn. I'm actually pro porn when it's used for erotic purposes, not educational purposes. So porn is okay when it's used for people who want to use it for erotic purposes. But when people start using it for educational purposes, that's when we kind of get caught up in, am I doing this right? I'm not doing this right. I don't know what to do. I'm not orgasm. And it doesn't look like how the girl did it in the video. Or even when we see sex portrayed in TV or on movies, it always looks like somebody, listen to this. This is what it sounds like. It sounds like somebody just getting pounded, and then you hear moaning, and then it looks like they both orgasm at the same time. And we know that that's not real life, right? So if we're talking about real life orgasms, sometimes that happens with most people. The research says that most people with vulvas need direct clitoral stimulation. So over 80% of people with a clitoris, they need direct clitoral stimulation in order to orgasm, which means you got to get your hands moving down there. You got to get in a position that puts pressure on the clitoris. Some people can orgasm what they call a vaginal or cervical orgasm, which is included with deep penetration. But let me tell you, the way the clitoris is set up, what we now know about the clitoris is that all orgasms come by way of the clitoris, pun intended. Okay. So all orgasms come because the clitoris extends inside the body. So whichever way you have an orgasm, whether the penis is inserted into the vagina or not, or whether whatever is inserted into the vagina or not, you are still stimulating a part of the clitoris. The clitoris is homologous to the penis. So there's a shaft, there's bulbs, there's a head, and all of that other stuff. So whatever type of orgasm you have, there is no superior orgasm. So there's no hierarchy of orgasms. So whichever way a person needs or feels great or good to orgasm, whether that's with a vibrator, with a hand, with the leg, with the stomach, orgasm in the way you need to orgasm.
Wow.
Yes.
I love it. I hope y'all hearing her, because she is bringing it to us with that real concrete information, and I appreciate it. I really appreciate it. It's so funny because I was just thinking to myself when you said the 80% do the clitoral stimulation. I'm just like, yeah.
Directly.
Because I think a lot of times, I guess that goes back to what you're talking about. We can feel maybe insecure, or maybe that something's wrong with us, or because we're not socialized or conditioned to talk about this.
Absolutely not.
Yeah,
absolutely
that's a real validation about a conversation that I would never have had you not mentioned it.
See?
Yeah.
That's why this work is so important.
Yes, it is. It really is. It really is. So what do you want Black families to know about sexual freedom?
So when I think of sexual freedom, and what I want Black families to know about sexual freedom is, it's yours. It's basically what you view as sexually free. It's not my own definition of it, right? So sexual freedom means, first of all, that you are able to be comfortable and expressive in your own sexuality. So however you like to express your sexuality, however you like to identify sexually, whatever your sexual boundaries are, how you like to experience pleasure, Knowing that you're okay, you're safe, you're comfortable, that's sexual freedom. So basically, I look at sexual freedom as more of a sex positive experience for all people, being able to have these types of conversations in any type of setting without having to whisper or, cover your mouth, or without having to be soaking wet after having a conversation because you know what I'm saying? But making sure that this is normalizing pleasure, allowing us to have access to information that is free from bias, that is consent informed, that is pleasure based, that is medically accurate. That is what I call sexual freedom.
Love it, love it. How do we work around the differences in sex drive between people?
In sex what? Drive?
In sex drives, yes. So one person, might want to have sex twice a week, and another person's like twice a month.
Okay. So that comes up often on the green couch. A lot of people say, I have a low sex drive or low sex desire, and my partner wants sex more than me. Do they not like me? Do they not find me attractive? So I find that comes up a lot, and that often keeps a lot of couples apart from each other because it creates some distance and some space in the relationship, as you might see. And so another part of owning your sexuality and sexual freedom is, I have this motto that I like to live by and that I like to talk to people about all the time, and it's called create your own relationship. People often ask, and create your own sexual relationship. People often ask, how often should we be having sex? In a week, in a month? And I'm like, how often do you want to? There's no magic number of what is sufficient. It's all about what works for the relationship. So most couples have mismatched desire, meaning, like you said, somebody might want it twice a week, somebody might want it twice a month. And so what needs to happen is the way that we prioritize sex has to change, right? So we need to make sure that we're prioritizing sex and understand that when we're talking about sex, we're not just talking about the activity of intercourse, right? Because I think what pops up into a lot of people's head is penis and vagina penetration as soon as we talk about sex, but also knowing that sex is so much more than that. And I talk about that. I have a book called Use Your Mouth, and I talk about that in the book. What the difference in what sexual intimacy looks like. So sexual penetration and activity is a part of that, but also what works for this relationship sexually. Okay, if we're not having penetrative sex, what else can we do? Because there's a lot of other things that's considered sex. So we also can do mutual masturbation. We can watch each other masturbate. For some people, they like to have outer course, which is where you just have non-penetrative style sex. There are some people who, again, they watch pornography, and they might reenact something from there. And another thing is, a lot of people don't like this one. Because they think it's not spontaneous enough, but it is. And this isn't for every couple. I don't recommend this for couples who are not connected in their relationships. Otherwise, I recommend this for couples who are usually busy, but they're just having a hard time prioritizing the sexual part of the relationship. It's scheduling sex, right? And I don't mean scheduling, and I also talk about this in the book. I don't mean like saying, okay, tomorrow at 7:15 p.m. when I get home, I want to see you in a doggy style position for 15 minutes and we're going to have sex. It's more like, hey, this weekend is our weekend. It's our sexy time. Or when you see me get out of the bathtub, that's me. I'm going to be ready. So it's more about making it sexy, and it can be spontaneous, right? And so everything that's important to us, we schedule it. So as it relates to having mismatched desire, what works is for each person in the relationship to be able to prioritize sex in a way that works for them, but also be able to change what sex actually looks like in the relationship. If you're not having penetrative sex all the time, what else can you do to be sexually close to your partner?
Love it. Love it, love it, love it. Well, as we've already stated, you work a lot in the LGBTQ community. As we know, unfortunately, we're still not an LGBTQ. We're working on being more inclusive, but there's still like a lot of stigma, discrimination. So what does it look like when we're already talking about a difficult topic, and then you added layers of maybe some LGBTQ stuff where a person, maybe is out or is not out or is being discriminated against, and then to make it even more complicated, if we were to add like BDSM, like kinky, like just all these, it can't have many layers. So what would that look like in a client?
So it looks very different in every client, because every LGBTQ plus person has their own issues, and sometimes it's not even related to their orientation or their sexual identity or anything like that. Sometimes it's related to something else, but a lot of times it is, right? So how they show up at work, how they feel comfortable with presenting, understanding how a lot of people want to know, how do I have sex? How, you know, can I do this as this type of person who identifies as such and who's sexually attracted to this and who wants to be sexually expressive in this way? How do I navigate that? So it takes some work with getting people here and being comfortable with themselves, but also a lot of harm. Like, we have to make sure that the work we're doing, we're not putting our clients in further harm, because it's dangerous for a lot of LGBTQ people to be able to express themselves in the way they want to. I think it's very freeing for them to be able to come sit on the green couch and to get information about how they can live their lives. So sometimes they might not be able to be as expressive as they want to at work, but when they get home, they want to know, how do I connect with my partner in this way? And sometimes what happens is they're so oppressed from just society and work, and when they get home, it's hard for them to even still have that same connection or to have a good connection with their partners at home. So they come here for the same reasons that people who are not LGBTQ come here, to increase the intimacy, to increase the connection, but also to deal with a lot of the discrimination, the oppression, and the fear of just living as themselves every day. So that looks differently per person.
But I bet I can imagine. Is there anything in particular that you wish Black families knew about sexual freedom?
That is a great question, especially because I do see a lot of Black people, and when I hear some of the things that we talk about, or some of the ways in which we talk about sex and how we view sex, it's sometimes very heartbreaking to hear it. I just wish that people understood that there's no right way to be a sexual being. And that's what I wish a lot of Black families knew, because a lot of us, of course, what I find is pretty universal with a lot of Black people I work with is that many of us come from real Baptists, especially Southern Baptists. Like, we come from very religious. We love Jesus. We love us some Jesus. We come from very religious background. And one thing that I want us to know is that you can still love Jesus and still be a sexual being at the same time. And still honor your sexual boundaries, which it's conflicting for a lot of people, because you're still a sexual being, right? So God made you a sexual being. One of my favorite sexologists is Brittany Mitchell, and she does a lot of sex therapy with believers at the intimacy firm. And she has a talk that she calls "If God Created My Clitoris." And I often tell, and it's amazing, I recommend it for everyone. And I often tell a lot of people, like, you need to consult with her whenever you have some issues that are conflicting with your faith and your sexuality. And so for a lot of Black couples, I want them to know that you can still maintain your religious values, but also honor your sexual self at the same time.
Oh, I love that. Well, speaking of honoring our sexual selves, can we talk about oral sex?
Of course. Let's talk about it.
Play there. Talking about being Southern Baptist, it's bad enough we're learning how to have sex. Now you want to add extra stuff, on top of it. How can people get more free and enjoy both maybe giving and receiving oral sex?
Read Song of Solomon. That's biblical porn. I tell people that all the time.
It is. I read that. Yes, it is.
So listen, if we're talking about oral sex, that is not, surprisingly, it's not as taboo as it once was. There used to be, maybe 20 years ago, there was, or maybe longer than that too, there was this like myth that Black women didn't give their men oral sex, that was like a white person's thing, like white women. You remember that? Like, that was like for white women. And so people were like, nah, Black women, they do it. They just not You know, like, they're just not, doing it like that. And also because, hello, Black women, we couldn't be all out with it then. But so now we are in the age of information. We're in the age of social media. So we are in the age of way more expression and exposure than ever. And so it's not as taboo anymore. So people are now engaging in oral sex in the way that they want to, in lots of different ways. So it's not as taboo. I really don't have a lot of people having issues with it, except I do have people that I see, like I said, I see a lot of different people. And so there are some Catholic people who they can't get with it. So they are like, nah, I really can't do that. I just can't do that. That's just not okay. And so I always meet people where they are and work with people where they are. And so we figure out ways for them to still maintain and enjoy their sexuality, but figure out ways to go around that. So for some people, they're still conflicted about it. I always tell people, don't ever feel pressured to do anything that you don't want to do, because sex is something that we want to make sure that it's, of course, pleasurable and enjoyable. And for many people, it's very sacred and spiritual. And if you're doing something that you don't feel comfortable doing, or if you're feeling forced or pressured, you're not going to enjoy it. And so that's going to breed some negative reactions to it. And then possible trauma. And so, we don't want to go there. So, I mean, as it relates to oral sex, people are getting their oral sex on.
Yes. What about their anal sex?
That too. So that's a whole other thing. That's something that historically was considered gay sex, which isn't even a thing. There's no such thing as gay sex, but it was considered a thing that gay men had anal sex as a way for them to engage in sex. But now we know that many other people are enjoying anal sex as well, which is another erogenous zone for many people who like to engage in that way. There are safe ways to engage.
I'm sorry to cut you. I was just, when you mentioned erogenous zone, can you have an orgasm anally?
Yeah, a lot of people have orgasms via anal sex.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, especially for people with penises, they have their prostates there, and so for them it's said to be very pleasurable there, and it's said that they have their strongest orgasms when their prostates are stimulated. So whether that be via finger or via another orifice, it's said that people with a penis can have a very amazing orgasm once their prostates are stimulated.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Good information. Good to know. Where do we as Black families struggle the most about sexual freedom?
I think accepting what sexuality is. What I see is basically accepting sexuality. We don't really historically, we didn't have access to the information, being able to be expressive, understanding sexuality, accepting, having the language to talk to our children about sex, and understanding that sex isn't inherently a bad thing. So I think that's where we struggle most with the messages that we receive about sex. So it's okay to have sex, but no, we don't talk about it. No, you can't say penis. My kids use those terms all day. Penis. That's all. I have boys and a penis all day. So, I think that's where we struggle most, is basically having the language and having the information, but also accepting the information. So we have the information. I find that now we're not accepting it because that's not what we were taught. For a lot of us, it's like, nah, I wasn't taught that. That's not what I'm going to go with. I'm going to call this a thing, and I'm not going to believe it, and I'm not going to accept it, and I'm going to be very disrespectful with it. So I think we struggle with accepting what sexuality is.
Wow, we got to accept it. And are you finding that you said you had 2 boys, right?
My husband and I have 4 children together, and I have 2,
okay,
biological sons.
So then, do you notice that there's just as much of an issue with girls saying vagina?
So, yes.
Only boys can use the word penis. So I was trying to clarify that. So, like, whether it's boys or girls, are we also having a hard time saying the word vagina?
So I think what I'm seeing is a lot of us, and I don't think this is specific to race, but a lot of us are giving our children nicknames for their genitals, right? So we call an eye an eye, a nose, a mouth, but we're calling a penis a wee-wee, a wiener. We're calling a vulva a cookie, you know, and that's not okay. That's dangerous. And also that contributes to the culture of shame around sexuality. And it teaches children that their body parts are something that they aren't supposed to embrace and that it's supposed to be shameful and they need to give it a nickname. A penis and a vulva are two different body parts, just like your ears. You wouldn't call an ear a mouth. So why are we calling a penis a wee-wee?
Right.
And it's also dangerous because we know that children are molested and sexually assaulted.
Yeah.
And, you know, when your kid comes home and says, they took my cookie or they touched my cookie at school.
Right.
And if you're calling a vulva a cookie, you might miss that your child's being sexually assaulted or molested.
Right. That makes so much sense. And just so you know, you did just call me out because it's funny because we call it pee-pee. We call it pee-pee. But then when I was giving birth to my son, I broke it down to my daughter and I said, okay, this is mommy's vagina is gonna do XYZ. And then as soon as it's done, I went right back to pee-pee. And I'm like, no.
Yeah, no, we're not doing pee-pee.
Yeah, we're not doing pee-pee. Okay.
Because my thing is, why do you teach that and then you have to reteach them the correct terminology? So let's just start off with the correct or proper anatomical terms so that they'll know what this is, so that they won't grow up. And so if we're talking about sexual freedom and if we're talking about sex positivity, giving them the power to use the correct terminology shows that this is sexual freedom. It shows a level of acceptance. It shows a level of not having that shame towards bodies. It's a body. That's it.
That's absolutely right. Absolutely right. What is a common myth that you hear often around sexual freedom?
So one is that, and I think we kind of maybe touched on this often, but a myth that I hear is that promiscuous women, and whatever that means, so whatever we determine to be a promiscuous woman is not safe sexually, so they're more prone to have STIs or STDs. So that is a myth that we know. Also, another myth is that this whole gender role stuff, if boys don't play with boy toys or if you let boys play with dolls, that they're going to be gay. That is a whole other myth. So there are lots of different myths that I hear as it relates to sexuality. Also, if I hear, one of the bigger ones that I really loathe is if you talk to your children about sex, that they're more prone to engage in sex. And so that's one of the ones that really grinds my gears, because the research even disproves that on so many levels, which is why I'm not understanding why we don't have comprehensive sexual education across the board, because we know everything else doesn't work. And we know that the research even shows that the more information our children have about sex, the more prone they are to make more informed choices, the more they are to delay the onset of having sex, and the less risky sex they engage in. So they protect themselves more as well.
Good. Love that. You hear that, Black parents? So
yes, Black parents.
It sounds like we've been putting our own anxiety and discomfort about this conversation on our children, and we're not talking about these things based off of inaccurate assumptions.
That's absolutely what it is. So we are not comfortable talking about sex. A lot of us don't have the language to talk to our children about sex. So we don't. We just say stuff like, they're too young to know that. I'm like, nah, there's an age-appropriate way to talk to children about everything. They understand. And the only way it becomes awkward is if we make it awkward as parents. So I always recommend this one resource for people to talk to their children at any age about sex, and that's Sex Positive Families. So that's a great resource to that teach you to talk to your kids about sex, or to help you find someone who can.
Is that a book that you just referenced? Sex
Positive Families is actually a website. They're also on social media. So, I love them. sexpositivefamilies.com.
Got it. And it's just so funny because even as you were saying about like naming the body parts correctly, even sex, we call it the birds and the bees. especially when we're talking about having the conversation with kids. And I'm like, what is that?
Exactly. And if we know anything about bees and sex, we don't even want to go there. So, because the queen kills the person after they have sex with them, so we don't want to. Yes.
Oh my God! I did not know that.
That's what I think I read that somewhere a while ago, and I was like, okay, yeah, so that's definitely a reason not to call it the birds and the bees.
Mm-hmm. Jeez. Wow. That's very interesting. What is one thing that we might have already addressed this, but is there any, like, if there was one thing that we can choose out of everything you know about sexual freedom, what can Black families take away? What would you want Black families to take away from it today?
I want Black families to get some real sex education. Mm-hmm. That's what I want. I want us to get real sex education, not the STI, not just the STI, STD prevention stuff. I want us to get some real sex education, the sex education that is comprehensive and inclusive of all sexualities, that is based on pleasure, that is consent informed, that discusses consent, because that's huge. I just want us to get the information, and not just get the information, but I want us to apply it to our lives, because we can literally, sex education saves lives, and we know this, the research tells us this, and the more information we have, the more accessible to the information we know that we can save as many lives. Children are completing suicide at way higher rates than ever before. We know that children who feel safe with talking to their parents about sexuality, they are less likely to attempt and engage or complete suicide. So I just want Black families to know that we can save our children if we have sex education.
That is so good. And I always like to tell my parents this: if you don't talk to your kids about sex, somebody will.
Somebody else will. And they're going to give them the wrong information. Okay?
And you said we are all sexual creatures.
We all are. And that, whether or not we engage in sex or not. So choosing not to have sex is still exercising your sexuality. So, and people need to understand that, right? And you are so right about, if you don't talk to your children about sex, someone else will. My kids come home, and because we talk about sex openly in our house, in age-appropriate ways, of course, our children come home and they talk about stuff that people talk about on the bus. And there was a conversation that they heard on a bus about masturbation, and they didn't say masturbation, but they were saying that some boys on the bus were saying if they masturbate, they get taller. So, yes.
I remember, for me, I remember hearing, and I believed this for probably 2 or 3 years, that if a man pees in a woman, she'll get pregnant.
See what I'm saying? I remember I used to watch, I don't remember what this show was, but a long time ago with my mom, we watched this show, and a girl was on there saying, like, after you have sex, you need to get a Coca-Cola and shake it up and allow it to go inside of your vagina after sex so you don't get pregnant. And I don't remember what that was on, but I was like, oh no, that's how we don't do it.
I can imagine that would really be uncomfortable. I can't imagine.
You're going to have all kind of infections.
You literally thought you pour the Coke in there?
Yeah, you shake it up. And this is like Coke. You remember when Coca-Colas came in a glass bottle? You shake it up in the glass bottle and you open it and allow it to explode inside the vagina.
Oh my God. You see,
yes.
Parents, talk to your kids, okay?
Because that's how I can prevent pregnancy, okay?
Oh, I bet.